Hi everyone, my name's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today I have some exciting news. I recently hit 1,000 subscribers, which is absolutely wild. 1,000 subscribers is like the first big milestone for a lot of booktubers and YouTubers in general. And this came at about the same time as my 1-year anniversary on BookTube, which was in February. And then it also came at about my 100th video. So just kind of a lot of milestones all rolled into one. And it was just a very, very happy and proud moment for myself. I'd like to take this moment to thank all of you guys, all of my subscribers, all of my viewers, everyone that has continually supported me from the beginning, or anyone that has just now got on this bandwagon. I'm only here doing this because of you guys and because of how much fun I have doing it, and I'm so glad I've been able to get to know a bunch of you and get to talk to you guys all the time about books we all love, and it's just been such a fun journey, and it's all thanks to you guys. So thank you, thank you, thank you for all of your support. With that, I have two kind of fun announcements for this 1K milestone, and then I will be getting into my February wrap-up. It's a little late, but I had a very busy February, and this wrap-up is kind of short anyway because I didn't read a whole lot in February, so mushing these videos together. First, for the two announcements, I will be doing a live Q&A session sometime in the next probably week or two. I haven't scheduled it yet, but I'm hoping to do that soon, and I would love for whoever is available to come join, ask any questions you have about my favorite books, about BookTube in general, about my life. I will answer as openly and honestly as I feel comfortable doing, depending on the questions you guys ask. But I think this would be a really fun opportunity for you guys to get to know me a little better and for me to also get to know you guys a little better. So be on the lookout for that announcement. I will be announcing that soon. Now for my second announcement, I am starting my very own Patreon. This is never ever going to be a requirement for you guys to watch any of my videos on my YouTube channel. With that being said, there are some exclusive perks to being a patron of my channel. That's kind of part of the draw of Patreon in general, but I'm not requiring that anyone join this. If you feel like supporting my channel more or getting access to some of these exclusive perks, by all means, it would mean the world to me if you joined. But if you don't join and you're still here sticking around watching my content, that is also a-okay. Any support you can give is welcome, and it does not have to be monetary. With that, let's get into the 3 tiers of the Patreon. There will be no surprise to anyone that I've named my tiers after the Locked Tomb. So we have the Cavaliers, the Necromancers, and the Lictors. At the Cavalier level, which is $3 a month, you'll be supporting my channel. You will get patron exclusive reading sprints. I haven't decided yet on how often that will be. I'm kind of gonna probably do the first few and see how frequently I can do those, but I'm leaning towards doing 1 a month. So patron exclusive reading sprints. You'll get a shout out at the beginning of every video. If you've watched a lot of BookTube, you've seen other BookTubers little cards at the beginning of their video that has all of their patrons. I will also have that. And when you join, you will get a personalized thank you message that I will send you. So that is the Cavalier level. At the Necromancer level, at $5 a month, you'll get all of the things that the Cavalier level gets, as well as 1 vote on my TBR every month. I know that Alex over on Tall Guy Reads does this, and I think it's just super fun for your patrons to get to kind of have an influence on what you're reading and to help pick what you're reading next. And now at the Lictor level, which is $10 a month, you get everything that the 2 previous levels get, but instead of getting 1 vote on the TBR every month, you get 2. So you'll have 2 chances to help choose what my TBR will be for the next month. Again, joining this Patreon is totally voluntary, and it is just there to help support me, support the channel, help me grow as a booktuber. I think it'll also be a really fun opportunity for you guys to get to hang out with me personally. We'll do these monthly reading sprints or however long they're gonna be, and we'll just get to hang out. We'll get to read together, we'll get to chat together. I think it'll be a really fun thing for me to kind of get to know the people that support my channel. So that is my Patreon. Again, completely voluntary, but it would be incredible if you have the means and you have the desire to support the channel. That is a way you can do it. I will link the Patreon down below if you are interested. Moving on from channel announcements. Thank you guys again for 1,000 subscribers. You guys are amazing. So with that, let's talk about books. My February reading month was kind of slow. I kind of hit a reading slump, and it was weird because a lot of people I know also were going through reading slumps, which is very bizarre. I wonder if it was like the cold weather winter months. I don't know. I was having a hard time really getting invested in anything I read. I read quite a few books, but I only really loved maybe one or two. I had a really hard time really connecting with a lot of what I was reading. So it kind of is a bummer because I think a lot of these I probably would have liked more if I was in a better headspace. But anyway, with that, let's get into it. The first book I read was The Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin. This is the big booktube read along that a lot of people are participating in. This book, I felt like the first half was so slow. And I know that works for some people, but for me, I just felt like nothing was happening. I was kind of bored throughout the first half, but then the last half was really dope. That last big battle was so fun to read, and this was definitely a good book. I still don't see A Song of Ice and Fire becoming one of my favorite fantasy series of all times, but I definitely respect it more than the first time I read it. And Clash of Kings was fun. I'm excited to read A Storm of Swords when I get to it because a lot of people say that that is the best fantasy book ever written, which kind of blows my mind. So I'll see how I feel when I get to it, but yeah, so I read A Clash of Kings in February. Next up, I read Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is the first book in the Red Rising saga. I'm buddy reading the series with Kyle over on Read by Kyle and Alex from Tall Guy Reads. This was technically a reread for me. I read this book last year, maybe the year before. I listened to it on audio, and the audiobook just really didn't work for me, and I didn't love it. And then I started Golden Sun and was just like, I don't feel like this. So I DNF'd the series back then. So I'm trying again. I read Red Rising and kind of felt pretty similar to how I felt the first time. It wasn't a bad book. I just did not like the Hunger Games competition vibe that went on, the survival game they did. I just found it pretty boring. I think that it did set up for a much more interesting story from here on out. And spoiler alert, I did recently finish Golden Sun and it was buck wild and way better than Red Rising. So I have hope for the rest of the series, but Red Rising for me was just okay. It set up an interesting world, it set up some stuff, but Darrow was incredibly annoying and didn't love it. If you don't know what Red Rising is, it is a story that is like a futuristic sci-fi story where humanity has basically bred people to be classified in these different groups based on color. So there's gold at the top and red at the bottom. And gold are they're in charge of everyone. They are superhuman. They are taller. They are stronger. Reds are manual laborers. They do the mining and all this other stuff. So Darrow is a red, and he lives in this mining colony where they are getting Mars ready for colonization. So they are mining for helium-3 so that they can make Mars habitable. When Darrow's wife dies, he decides that he also does not have anything to live for. However, circumstances change and he ends up getting picked up by a rebel group called the Sons of Ares, who make him into a gold and try to get him to infiltrate society. So you kind of see this really, really, honestly, wild, disgusting caste system that humanity has come up with. And you see Darrow trying to bring that down from the inside. In this book, Darrow was honestly just so annoying. So I didn't love him as it's all told from his point of view, and I didn't love that because I didn't like him. But the story itself was pretty good, and I think that the premise is interesting. So I think that as I go further, I will really enjoy this series. Next up, I read Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. This was one of my 12 books by 12 booktubers recommendations. I will link that video down below. This was recommended to me by Ian over on Ian the Reader, and I'm very glad he recommended this to me. It was perfect for February because it's small, and it was a really good kind of palate cleanser book to read after some of these darker books. I mean, this is definitely a darker book, but it was very fast paced, it was short, and I thought it was a lot of fun. This is a story about a young boy who has the power to bring heroes back from the dead with the goal of killing a Shinigami, which is a demon. And so he's bringing all of these mythical heroes back from the dead to fight for him in this battle. And so it's just kind of this exploration of what these characters are doing and their past and why they were heroes and who this boy is. And it's a really, really fun story. And the ending, I didn't see coming at all. I felt like something was amiss, but I didn't see what that twist was going to be at all. And it was so good. I really, really loved this. It was fun. It was also one of the first self-published books I've read in a long time. I think the last one I read was Sword of Kaigen. So overall, really, really great book, and I'm excited to continue the series. Next up, I read The Veiled Throne by Kin Liu. This is the third book in the Dandelion Dynasty, and I thought it was okay. There were a lot of things I loved about it. There were a lot of parts I really enjoyed, and then there was a lot of parts that I found unnecessary or dragged on. This is a very big generational fantasy story where we follow successive generations as they try to lead this world. And Wall of Storms was a really fast-paced, action-packed book, and we followed a lot of great characters. And in this one, we kind of switch which characters we're following. There's still definitely a lot of the same characters in the book, but we focused more on some of the other characters that I just didn't feel as much attachment to. So from the get-go, I was kind of like not as attached to this story because the characters we were following, I didn't enjoy as much as the characters from Wall of Storms. And I also found that there was just a few places where the story just kind of bogged down. For it being such a long book, I honestly feel like it could have definitely been shorter. And I know that this and the last book were originally one big book, and so I believe Kin Liu added a lot to separate them and make them two books, which I get, but I feel like some of the stuff in this book was just kind of unnecessary. Some of it dragged on. There was the infamous cooking competition that I felt like lasted like a quarter of the book, and this is not a small book. So just overall, I had some problems with the story, but I still respect it, and I still think that it is still a phenomenally crafted story about all of these different people, all of this political machinations going on, the cool magic. There's a lot. So there's still a lot to love. I just think that this one kind of wasn't at the height of Wall of Storms. But I've heard The Speaking Bones is really, really good, so I'm excited to get to that whenever I can. But yeah, so Veiled Throne was okay. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, so not a bad book by any means. Next up, I read What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. I was telling Kyle over on Read by Kyle that I am entering my memoir era. I've been really wanting to read memoirs lately. So I read this one, and it is a story about complex PTSD and the effects of childhood trauma on your adulthood. And Stephanie Fu just kind of gives us this very honest look into her life and how complex PTSD is something that isn't studied very much, not a lot of people know of, and the effects it has had on her throughout adulthood, how it's affected her work life, how it's affected her relationships, and how it's affected her relationship with her family, and on and on and on. And it is a really, really beautiful book and a really beautiful look into how childhood trauma really does affect you for your entire life. So really, really interesting book. I highly recommend it. Next up, another memoir. I read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. This is a very famous book. Maya Angelou is a famous author and poet and woman, and this is the first in like a series of memoirs that she wrote. So this goes up until she was like, I think like 15 or 16, and it was a really, really harrowing but also heartwarming story at the same time. She does a really great job of showing some of the awful things she went through as a child growing up in like a very segregated community, but also not missing out on the chance to highlight some of the good things that she experienced growing up and how a lot of what she grew up with was just kind of the norm, which doesn't make it okay, but showing that the perseverance of her and her family and how they still found joy in life, even though they were dealing with some very, very complicated, awful segregation. And it was a very, very well-written book. I listened to the audiobook and it was narrated by her, and she does such a good job of like just bringing her story to life, and I'm very excited to continue on with all of her memoirs. Next up, I've read a very, very short book that was also kind of a memoir. It was called About Alice by Calvin Trillin. This is kind of just a very short blurb that he wrote after his wife's passing, and I think it was like originally in a newspaper or something, and he expanded on it and made it into a very short book. And it was good for sure. I just feel like I didn't have a lot of context for who Alice was or anything. It was just kind of him being like, she was great, which is awesome. I just didn't really, it was so short that I didn't really have a chance to get to know who anybody in the story was. So good book if you know the context, but it was literally like a 1 hour audiobook. So next up, I read Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I've never seen the movies and I've also never read the books. So I decided that since this is a lot of people's this is like a very famous sci-fi story, I would give it a shot. And it was very good. I liked a lot of the science behind it. I liked learning about all of these dinosaurs and everything, and I really liked the characters. I felt like some of it was repetitive, but overall, I think that it was so fast-paced and my heart was pounding the whole time, and like it all takes place within like just a couple days. So it was very well written, very well paced. It had a lot of action and I had a lot of fun with this book. Next up, I read The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This is one of the translated books I wanted to read soon. I have a whole video of my translated sci-fi fantasy TBR and I will link that down below. But this was on that list. It was translated from Japanese and it's basically about a society where they can decide what people can remember. So they get rid of bicycles one day and nobody can remember bicycles. And there are a handful of people that their memory doesn't actually go away and they're summarily rounded up and killed, or rounded up and taken away. I think that this book the premise was good, but like there wasn't really a plot throughout a lot of it, and by the end it just kind of ended, and I honestly felt like I was just left hanging, and not in a good way. So overall, the premise was really good, but I didn't really love the execution. And last but not least, I read The Adventure Zone, the 5th graphic novel, and that is The 11th Hour. I've talked about this series in a lot of other videos. The Adventure Zone is a podcast that is a D&D actual play podcast, and the first campaign they call Balance, and they are adapting it into graphic novels. Balance is one of my favorite pieces of fantasy media that exists, whether it be movies, books, podcasts, whatever. It is one of my favorite pieces of fantasy media ever. And these adaptations are doing such a good job of showcasing and letting us visualize the things that they did in the podcast. So overall, this was incredible. The artwork was great. This is like one of the first times, not the first time, but we really get a lot of impactful emotional moments because a lot of this is like comedy. It's a lot of funny, goofy stuff. But by the end, you're crying your eyes out. This volume specifically, we get a lot of the first times where you're like, oh, this is serious. Oh, these are very emotional people. So I really think they did a great job with this. The changes they made from the podcast to the graphic novel, I think, were necessary, and they did a good job changing them. And the artwork by Carrie Peach is beautiful, as always. There was also some really funny moments. I'm trying to find her artwork is just really beautiful. So overall, I think that they did a great job with this, and I'm so excited for what the rest of the arcs will bring, because we start to get a lot more serious after this one. And that is all the books I read in February. It was kind of a subpar reading month, numbers wise and also just quality wise, just because I wasn't feeling it. But March is already shaping up to be much better. I've already read just as many books as I read in February, I believe. And so yeah, I'm hoping March is much better. Again, if you have any interest in joining my Patreon, that is linked down below. Thank you guys for watching. If you could please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down below what you read in February and if you also were in a reading slump. And if you really like my content, please hit the notification bell to be notified every time I post new videos. As always, your support means the world to me, and until next time, thank you guys.